A newer part of Unreal Engine is the Memory Insights tool. Now, at the current moment, it's not accessible from within the engine, so we're going to actually show you how to very easily get it set up so that way you can use it. With Memory Insights, you'll be able to do a lot of different things, but the big thing is going to be looking at how much memory you're using, so that way you can make sure you're hitting the target requirements that you have for the different devices. Now, of course, you can dive deeper into what we are going to do today and really get to understand how Memory Insights can be useful for you and what different tools it offers. For now, we're just going to look at how to get started and what that kind of looks like and just some basics on understanding the graphs. Now, because you guys know me, I like to show off a way to make the tools a little bit easier to use. What we're going to do today is create a .bat file, which is a batch file that lets you just launch the engine and insights at the same time with these settings. The reason why we want to do it this way is so that way we aren't having to go in and do this every single time. You just click one button on a file whenever you want to run Memory Insights. So as you can see here, let me full screen it so you guys can see. This is basically all you need. This is basically just saying the title of the command prompt. I like to do that. And then down below, this is the actual important bit. So this is the part that's going to change depending on your own personal project and where it's stored. Sorry, not project, technically, the actual engine files. So for me, it's on my D drive. If it's not on your D drive, you don't necessarily need to include this /D. This is just to take you to that directory. So for example, if you were on the C drive, you could just remove this part and have CD and then to your actual directory. But for me, it's on the D drive. But what you need to do is you need to go into your wherever it's stored, your Unreal Engine 5.5 actual folder. And you need to go find where this is actually stored. Now, once you actually find this folder, the rest of this should all be identical. So basically, this first part is the most important part. And so long as you've got this correct, everything after this you can copy paste. Because it'll be in your engine folder, in the binaries folder, in the Win64 folder, unless of course you are on Linux or a Mac, in which case you'll need to change that to the correct folder there. And then you're going to want to go to a new line and you're going to call unrealinsights.exe. So this will take you to that directory and this will actually launch the app, and we're giving it launch parameters right here. Now what we're giving it is the default, which technically we don't need, but I like to include it in case you're doing other insights. You're doing like a general holistic, profile of your game. You can always add or remove these as needed. But then the important one here is memory. Now we also add metadata and asset metadata because by adding these, this allows for your Memory Insights to give you a little bit more information on what exactly is causing the different memories stacks. So basically, it'll say, hey, here's these objects; these are all tied together, and allow you to look through them in that way as well. Now this is to launch Unreal Insights. Then down below we have basically a copy of this, except we're running the Unreal Editor.exe with the exact same commands. You have to run both in the same way, because otherwise you won't be able to track and then see the Memory Insights inside of Unreal Insights. And then of course we call pause just as a way to have that window stay open when we're done. All right, and I'm going to hit don't save since I didn't really make any changes. And then once you've got that .bat file up, what you're going to want to do is you want to go ahead and run it. I put it in this project folder just so I can keep it somewhere I know where it's at. Technically, you can put this anywhere on your desktop. It doesn't matter. It'll take a moment, but what you should see is it should boot up both your insights as well as your project browser. And then from here, you can go ahead and run whatever project you'd like. So for me, we'll just go ahead and do the Quest system. And as you can see there, it's actually going to launch it and immediately start profiling. Now, most of the data at this point is not going to be necessarily useful because it's not actually in your game. But what we're going to do is once we actually get this booted up, we can go in and we can actually stop it from tracing and restart it. Or we could leave it running. I'm going to leave it running and kind of show you what the different steps are as the editor launches, so you can kind of see and follow along. That's what bookmarks are so handy for. So we'll go ahead and jump in the game. We'll run around, do some stuff, maybe shoot off the gun, just some stuff to kind of give us an idea of, something is going on here. All right. And then from there, we will go ahead and quit. And then we're actually going to stop the trace here. Now, if we go back to Insights, we have a few different things we can do here. So we've got our session front end. Now, while we have an active instance running, you can actually see a little bit of data about what's going on. This is kind of handy if you're wanting to diagnose things in real time, because you can open this up in a second window and just kind of watch the statistics going on. It's still not as useful as an actual trace file, but it can be handy. And then we have, of course, our actual trace file, which we'll go ahead and open. Now, as you can see here, because we have Memory Insights turned on, by default, it's loading that in, and it's going to slowly sit here and load in all of the data. Now, at the top, those little green text that you probably might have a hard time seeing on the screen, but on your own personal screen, you should be able to see pretty easily. These are what is known as bookmarks. Now, the cool thing with these is this lets you kind of figure out where things are at in the project. That we can make sure you're looking at the correct portion of data before you start really diving into the weeds. So as you can see here, when the bookmarks start up, we're in the default main, and then garbage collection, and then editor startup. So basically everything before this, basically useless. But then when you get in closer, tick loop starting, find blueprint, asset registries, files loading. This is basically when everything starts loading in to the actual project. That's when you start seeing all of this going. You'll see files loading in. As we get over here, you see PIE. That's when I actually started the editor. That's sorry, not the editor. That is when I started playing the game in editor. So when I hit play in editor, that's when the garbage collection runs initially to load the map and everything. It gets started up, and then from there, as you can see, that's when everything after this is sort of where we're actually in the PIE. And then, boop, this garbage collection right here is when we're dropping off. This is when we're leaving the PIE. There's usually, PIE shutdown event that happens. And then everything after this is back in editor. So what does this tell us? If we're actually looking at just that portion of data, what information can we glean? So if we're grabbing this, we're saying this is roughly the extent of our, in the pie. What can we glean from here? There's a lot of different parts to Unreal Engine's Memory Insights, some of which, I'll be honest, I don't fully yet understand myself. But essentially, there is a couple of different ways you can look at this data. Now, of course, you have these tracks, and you can put these tracks however you want. So you can compare game frames and rendering frames. So you can kind of look at maybe if it's a specific frame that you're seeing hitching. You might be able to zoom in and see if it's a memory issue. And there's all these allocations versus free event counts. There's a lot of different data that can be gleaned at from here, right? But I think for me, the most important thing is going to be basically looking at it as a holistic view, right? Because if you're looking at all these different graphs, it can be kind of overwhelming because there's so much going on in terms of what's actually being presented to you. But the big thing is, you want to look at a couple of things. You want to look at, overall our memory graph usage. A big thing, especially long term, if you have a game that's going to be played for hours and hours and hours, is making sure to monitor that you're not having memory leaks. Now, of course, in this very short test we did, it was 1 minute. You're not going to really be able to glean that. That's not going to tell you a whole lot. But if you run it for 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, whatever, or if you've gotten complaints from players that there seems to be a memory leak, and after X amount of time, that's what seems to happen. Then having this open and running can let you see that happen in real time. so long as you leave it open long enough. Now, of course, a lot of this can be kind of overwhelming because there's a lot of different information going on here. The big thing to remember is this is broken down by what they call low-level memory. So these LLM tags, basically this means at the system level, from my understanding, it's like there's a couple different options. There's at the platform level. So these are things like DirectX 12, your local RAM, the overhead from the LLM tagging, things like that. That is all done at the system level, Windows level. And then after a layer of abstraction, you've got a lot more of the like engine stuff. And that's what these colors are. These are things that are tagged currently in the memory. And of course you can look at all this different information. It can tell you a whole lot, but it can be a little bit overwhelming. So the big thing for me is, I'm going to look at the things here that are showing a lot of memory. For example, here I have textures are taking up 246 megabytes. That might be something I could look at. How can I trim that down? Or is that something that, maybe that's an okay level? It kind of depends on your project and how much you're okay with loading into memory. You got physics, you got audio, you got animation, render targets, scene render. This is your if I remember correctly, this is basically your camera, renders in the scene. It's how much memory that takes up as it's doing so. You've got your U objects, which of course are going to go up as you're loading more things into the game. But yeah, so there's definitely a lot to it, as you can see here. Like the LLM total kind of gives you an idea of how many of those LLMs are being called versus the actual total tracked. But there's a lot, and I'm not going to be, this won't be the last video you see on this topic, but at least for today, we're not going to get too much more into the weeds. If you have any questions, definitely leave them down below. But otherwise, that's a very basic primer on getting started with Memory Insights. If you have any other questions or anything you want to know, definitely let me know. But otherwise, good luck and good hunting.